Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in.
At Humanity at Scale, we explore what it truly means to lead with impact. Not just by driving business success, but by building organizations that unlock human potential and put people at the heart of leadership. One of the biggest challenges leaders face today is navigating complexity while creating environments where people can do their best thinking and perform at their highest level. Too often, leadership is seen as having all the answers. But what if the real key to success is amplifying the intelligence and capabilities of those around you? And what if the greatest leaders aren't the ones who take center stage, but the ones who create the conditions for others to excel? That's why I'm thrilled to welcome Liz Wiseman, CEO of the Wiseman Group, executive advisor, researcher, and best-selling author of Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, Rookie Smarts, Why Learning Beats Knowing in the New Game of Work, and Impact Players, How to Take the Lead, Play Bigger, and Multiply Your Impact. Liz has helped leaders at Apple, Google, Microsoft, Tesla, and other top organizations build cultures where people do their best work and achieve extraordinary results. Her research uncovers why some leaders unintentionally hold their teams back, while the best leaders, multipliers, bring out the full potential in others. She also explores why a rookie mindset often fuels innovation and what sets high-impact contributors apart in today's workplace. At a time when organizations are expected to do more with less, Liz's insights couldn't be more relevant. Today, we'll discuss what it takes to become a multiplier, how leaders can build a lasting legacy by empowering others, and why curiosity and adaptability are essential leadership traits in a world of constant change. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Bruce, thank you. And thanks for that introduction. It was a good summary of the work that I am trying to do, and it made me feel happy to be doing the work. There was something about the way that you framed that made it, I think, interesting.
Well, I appreciate that because, as I mentioned before, I've been a big user of your work. And I think giving leaders the notion of how they can do better and make the people around them better is inherently interesting. So I think what you do is great, and it was easy to say something that makes it sound interesting.
Thank you.
So let's get going. You spent years studying leadership and the impact leaders have on those around them. What initially drew you to this work?
This was sense-making work for me. I feel like all of my research projects and then the eventual books really start from me just trying to make sense of the world and make sense of my world. And this was very much me trying to make sense of an experience that I had had. I had been at Oracle for 17 years. And when I joined the company, their hiring profile was a little bit intimidating because they hired people who were really, really smart and driven. And they tried to get nice in there too, but that was, if they compromised on one, that was the one they compromised on. But, I ended up just surrounded by all these really smart people, and I admired them. I felt lucky that I got to work around all these really smart people, but it was something I began to notice working around a lot of really, really smart people is that when they got put into leadership roles, not everyone around them got to be smart. And that's what I found very curious. I'm like, wow, I know that person. They're brilliant. And I'm watching them now as a leader, and they're brilliant, but the people around them aren't brilliant. But yet I know the people around them are, because I felt like there was this really intense concentration of just like kind of smart, driven people. And I'm like, what's going on there? And why is that leader, why is their intelligence costing other people's intelligence?
Yep. So and it's go ahead. I was going to say there's this great When I was a kid, I read this book, Encyclopedia Brown. For all of our listeners, I'm sure you've never heard of it. It's like old, but it was a son of a police chief. And he would always do this research. And one of the research that he did was he looked at the basketball team at his school. And he noticed that there was one kid who was really, really good, right? Everyone bowed down to him. But what he noticed was every time the kid was playing on the floor, the team did worse, right? He was by far the best player on the team, right? And Encyclopedia Brown, who would do these studies, ended up looking at it and going, he may be the best player, but when he's on the floor, they're not the best team. So as you were talking about the Oracle
Yes.
situation, I was thinking about Encyclopedia Brown.
Yes, it was an Encyclopedia Brown moment for me because I knew the other people were really smart. I had worked with them, I had seen it, and I'm like, what is going on here? And then I would look at other leaders, equally smart, but they use their intelligence more as a tool than a weapon. And everyone around them was smart, and like, there was a very different vibe to the meeting. Like, they walk in the room and people are kind of like sitting up, engaged, like, and not just like creative and innovative. It's like sharp, almost like I get to be sharp, but I also have to be sharp around this person. Like, they're expecting me to play big rather than just pass them the ball. To go back to that basketball metaphor. And I watched this play out for years and I was curious about it. And then I was coaching an executive. This was a tech leader who had like a pedigree education and background. And I watched what he was struggling with and what I came to call this diminishing effect he was having on others. And it was in coaching him that I could see, wow, this wasn't just about an experience at Oracle. This is a dynamic that plays out in a lot of places. I had no idea when I started the research that it wasn't just a dynamic in tech. This happens in hospitality. This happens in hospitals. That this is happening in our manufacturing organizations, our schools, our churches. And that's what I decided it was time to put some disciplined research to it to figure out, like, make it more than an observation, but really try to understand what's going on here.
That's great. I'm so glad you did it. And I think the central component of when you describe a leader who is not diminishing, right, who is empowering, is the notion of a multiplier, right? So for those in the audience who are unfamiliar with the core concept behind multipliers, maybe you can share a little background on what distinguishes those good leaders.
So if I kind of give the essence of the research, I looked at what do the leaders do differently? How is their mindset and thought process behind that behavior different? And then what is the result of that? How does it affect people? And in short, what I found is, these leaders hold very different mindsets. The diminisher tends to hold the belief that people aren't going to figure it out without them. They have to be on the floor, so to speak. Bruce, I like your metaphor, the Encyclopedia Brown. I might keep referring to that, but that, like, they can't let go of it or people aren't going to be able to perform well. Whereas the multipliers tend to hold this belief that fundamentally people are smart and they can figure that out. And in terms of the behavior, there were 5 big differences. The first was how they manage talent. And kind of in short, it's a difference between the diminisher who acquires talent and the multiplier who utilizes talent. The second difference is the climate, the culture that they create. And, the diminisher tends to create a tense culture, whereas the multiplier creates an intense culture. So it's not just like a hippie, free-for-all, fun-loving, creative, open culture. It's one where it's intense. Like, I have to do my best thinking and my best work, but I have a chance to do that. The third difference is how they set direction. The diminisher tends to tell people what to do, where the multiplier asks people, what can we do? What's possible? What should we do? the fourth difference that really defines these multiplier leaders versus the diminishers is how they make decisions. The diminisher tends to decide on the most important decisions, whereas the multiplier tends to debate the most important decisions. They get the brain trust together. And the last difference is how they drive for results, how they get things done. And the diminisher tends to micromanage. They do it themselves, whereas the multiplier tends to get it done through others. They hold people accountable. And we found that these multiplier leaders are getting virtually all of people's intelligence, their know-how, their insight, their creativity, whereas the diminishers are getting less than half.
So that's interesting. Sounds like a lot of them are about how do you get people to be a part of the solution and not just cogs following direction, right? It's following the pattern. The element that I think our audience might have difficulty with, or just understanding the nuance of, is the tense versus intense. What do those environments look like? How are those different? And how does a leader manifest each of those?
Yeah, because I could see someone maybe saying, oh, intense. I know how to create an intense environment. I'm going to hover over
Exactly.
everyone, expect everything. Yeah, no, this is a fun nuance. Let me share a few words that I think capture the difference. It's a difference between an environment that is, you feel stress, and an environment where you feel pressure. One is debilitating, one of those is enabling. And maybe my favorite way to capture this difference, it came from one of my multiplier interviews, K.R. Schroeder, who is the CEO of Bloom Energy, a really amazing scientist as well. And when I was asking him, because people said, oh yeah, he creates an environment that's really intense, but not tense. I'm like, KR, like, what's the difference between those in your mind? And he cites the story of William Tell, who was this famed Swiss archer. I think this is from maybe the 1500s. And in this scenario, I think a lot of us know the story of William Tell. We remember him as the guy who had to shoot the apple off his son's head.
Yep.
And, he doesn't show proper obeisance to the Austrian overlord. This is during the Swiss Confederacy, time. And he gets sort of sentenced to this interesting punishment, which is if he can shoot the apple off his son's head, he and his son can go free. If not, he's condemned. And what Kara said was, in this scenario, and so you have to imagine, the son is like standing there, like in this village square with the apple on his head. And then the father, William Tell, is across the village square with a crossbow. And Kara said, in this scenario, William Tell feels pressure. His son feels stress. And when you think about that, like, what's fundamentally different in this scenario between like their two stations in this is one of them is in control and the other isn't. And I think it's what we find that good leaders do is they give people control. Like when we have a high standard, a high target, we're accountable things, but we're given control of decisions and, inputs and how we work. And like, we feel like this intensity in our work, but we feel fundamentally in control. That creates an intense environment where we're given high standards, big targets, held accountable, but we're not in control of how we do that, how we work. Like, it just creates stress. And we know what stress does to our ability to think and reason and solve problems. Like, the amygdala takes over, our lizard brain, so to speak, our survival brain takes over, our panic mode sets in, and we lose our ability to handle trade-offs and complexity. Like, if you want people to navigate uncertainty, they give people control.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that sometimes when people think about great leaders and what leadership is and the way you're going to be a leader that's going to motivate an organization, they think you have to be nice. It's about being nice and being kind. But the idea of intense intense environments is almost counter to that, right? Like you don't it's not about being nice all the time. It's not about like letting people do what they want to do. You still, these people, these multipliers are driving great performance, which is not the same thing as being nice. Maybe you can talk about that. Were they all nice leaders? Are the multipliers nice by
No,
any dimension?
no, they were not all nice leaders. Now, they probably like were all decent human beings and like had maybe a spirit of nice and kind about them. Like they weren't mean spirited in any way, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as nice. Let me just talk about my own multipliers. Now, I grew up at Oracle, and it was a pretty intense place to work. And when I look at the people who were multipliers to me, it was not because they were nice to me. They were certainly not mean to me, but they weren't the kind of leaders who like came up and put their arm around me and said, "Oh, gee, Liz, we just care about you so much. We love you. We appreciate you. You're the best." In fact, I kind of hate working around leaders who give this false sense of like, "Oh, golly shucks, you're awesome." These were leaders who asked me to do really hard things, who saw things in me that I probably didn't see. I was too immature to really see my skills. And they asked me to do hard things. And then they never backed off of those hard things. They never stepped in and did them for me. And then when I succeeded, like I was showered with praise and thanks and appreciation and recognition. I remember one of these leaders was Ray Lane. Oh boy, Ray, if you happen to end up listening to this, you're going to kill me for saying this, but like Ray was not known as being like this nice guy leader. He was not hard on people, but he expected people to do really good work. And I remember once he and I were working on something, and I had done a really good job. And at the end of this like year-long project, up on the stage, he's just like, "I need to tell you about who is responsible for this and this and this and this." And he's kind of going on and on about my contribution. And people afterwards, people in the audience were like, "That's the nicest thing we've ever heard Ray say about someone." Because he wasn't someone who led with like showering just false praise, but when someone did great work, like he was like standing and applauding that. I had a bunch of leaders who like were like this, and none of them were mean or mean spirited in any way. But it's my publisher said when she saw the manuscript, she was like, "Wow, these are not cupcakes and kisses kinds
Yes,
of
I love
leaders."
that. Yes,
Yeah, and,
that's
and she
great.
saw that there was this hard edge, and I think what I saw was this interesting duality, because I wouldn't want anyone to falsely conclude that, okay, to be a multiplier and get the best out of people, I can never crack a smile, and I can't be nice to people, and I have to just be hard and demanding. That's not the story either. It's about like a fusion of two sides. It's an equilibrium between things that might look like very humanistic, very empowering. Like these are leaders that listened, supported, saw strengths in other people, appreciated people, were inclusive. They were all of those things, but that alone doesn't tend to produce great performance. Like that might have been a softer side. That's part of it. It's half of it. On the other side, they had kind of a hard edge. They asked hard questions. They gave you big challenges. They had high expectations, high standards, and they held you accountable for
So
that
how
work.
did so it sounds like the multipliers get, well, and your multiplier leaders with you got the best out of you and praised you when you did it. How do multipliers deal with people they're working with who aren't performing, right? There's the flip side, right? You got praise for the great work that you did, but I'm sure there were other people in the organization who just weren't getting it done. So how does a multiplier deal with someone in the organization who isn't stepping up or isn't
Mm.
achieving to the degree that that leader would want to see them achieve?
Well, I think there's truth telling in it, and I think the multiplier approach to feedback is one about giving people information they need to do a good job. It's almost like treating feedback not as a judgment about a person, but just intel on people's work. I also think of a leader who got the best out of me, who in one of our like performance discussions, he's like, Liz, in this part of the work, you're doing C plus work. Over here, you're doing like A plus work, but over here it's C plus. And I remember being so mad about this. I'm like, I don't really want to be a C plus kind of student on this. Like, I want to do A work. And I could see that he was right, that I really cared about this one part of the work, but I was like, yeah, just sort of phoning it in on this other. But he told me the truth about that. And I ended up deciding that that was work I didn't really want to do. And I ended up making a really important pivot in my career because I wanted to do, great work. But he was the one who enabled me to see that in something I couldn't see. I think, so I was like underperforming in a part of my work. I think the other orientation is, it's very much an incremental approach. It's not like, gee, here's what an A plus is, and you can either make it or you can't. It's understanding that when the gap is too big, people give up. They'll give up. And so it's about how do we help close those performance gaps? And it's probably thinking in terms of incremental successes. It's thinking about creating challenges that are right-sized. And it's probably the way we think about, not that we think about, the way we're naturally drawn to parenting skills. And when we see young people trying to do something, we don't go, well, you either can do this or you can't. We're like, okay, what's within range for this person, for their age level, for their skill level, and let me create a challenge that they can master. I think about when my children started to walk. It wasn't like, well, you either walk or you don't, and if you can't walk, you're out.
We're going to slide you along for the rest of your life.
Yeah, well, okay, like they're capable of some baby steps. So let me stand a couple feet back and create a gap that this little child can close. And then we like, yay. And then when they're able to do that, what do you do next? You create a little bit bigger gap. Like, okay, let's see if they can walk 4 feet. And even like, when they walk and they get there, you might even scooch back and go, okay, I know you can go a little bit further. Like, keep going. It's incremental, very much like, like someone might train a killer whale to jump up and like ring the bell. You don't start with here's the bell and you can either ring it or you can't. It's a growth orientation of what is this person capable of and how do we stretch that and create a little bit higher capability, and that is done incrementally.
Interesting. So I want to go back to a little bit when you talked about you were a C plus in one area and an A in another, right?
Oh my gosh, Bruce, you're going to make me talk more about being a
no,
C+ player?
No, we're going to talk about...
No, I'm fine.
Well, are you feeling intense or tense? That's all I want to know.
Intense. No, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm teasing you.
Yeah, because there's a lot of work about like human strengths, right? And playing to your strengths. Like there's a lot of research in that. So is it important that a multiplier help someone they're working with, someone working for them, like the leader helped you recognize what your strengths are and not push someone to achieve in somewhere outside of their strength area? Like, what role should a multiplier take in helping someone find their strengths?
Okay, I want to explore this from 2 perspectives because I think there's 2 really important ways to look at this. One is the strengths approach. I do think it's what a good leader does. Is certainly what we saw multipliers do. Is they help people. They use people's native genius, like a towering strength, something not only that they're good at, not because they studied it in school or watched a YouTube video, but like something they're innately brilliant at. I call it native genius. There's a lot of different names for this. They find it and then they utilize it. Like, gee, Bruce is really good at relationship building or problem spotting. Like, okay, now how can we use that in this job and in other roles, and how can we use it across a team? And they talk about that openly, and they talk about it as teams, and people feel like deeply seen for their capabilities and also challenged for it. So yes, absolutely, there is that side of it. And sometimes a leader can see what other people can't see. Like all of my strengths I discovered because other people told me I was good at them. I'm like, really? That just seems easy. They're like, no, like you're good at it and not everyone is good at it. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't really notice because everywhere I go, like I've just been good at that. So it seemed like a neutral thing to me. So I think that's like side A. But if we look at side B, I think we can carry this too far and say, well, in my work, I really just want to work at what I'm good at and strong at. But yet there is work to be done. And like just because you have strengths and you know about those strengths doesn't mean that excuses you from doing other work and finding ways to apply your strength to that work. And I think that's the mistake I was making in that like A plus versus C plus is I probably could have found ways to take my strengths and apply them better to that area. Bruce, let me tell you a quick story. So I love leading. I love watching great leaders. I just love the art of leading. I love teaching leadership. I came out of grad school kind of wanting to have a career in leadership development. And I was kind of trying to angle my way into a job where I could do what I love doing today. And, you know, I tried to get hired by a leadership development company and they very wisely said, like, you seem great, but maybe you should learn to lead. I took a job at Oracle and you know, I'd been there about a year and there was this opening in this group, this training group. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to try to like get a job there because like right now they teach these technical boot camps, but like maybe that's a good place for me to do some leadership development work. And so I'm interviewing for this job and I'm interviewing with the vice president and he asked me a bunch of questions. I answer them. And then it's sort of my turn to ask him some questions. And I made an observation, you know, this is early days at Oracle. We had a lot of technologists thrown into management who didn't really know what they were doing. And so I said, Bob, we've got a lot of young technologists who are finding themselves in leadership positions with no experience, with no training. Like in addition to running these technical boot camps for our employees, like maybe we need a management boot camp. And like, I would love to help build this. And so I'm basically offering him like what I'm passionate about and what I, you know, have come to like be good at today. And I will never forget Bob's response. And he was a great leader and he was a great leader for me. He said, well, like you seem great, Liz. We've heard great things about you. We'd love to have you on the team. But, and I agree, Liz, this is a problem. He said, but your boss has a different problem. She's got to find a way to get 2,000 new college graduates up to speed in Oracle technology over the next year. And what would be great is if you could help her solve that problem. That wasn't a problem I wanted to solve. It wasn't a job I wanted. Like I wanted to teach leadership. And what Bob is implying is that like now they want me to like teach programming to a bunch of programmers, like to a bunch of nerds. And I remember thinking, I don't know anything about the technology. I'm not a programmer, and that's not really what I want to do. But what he was saying is, like, this is actually what we need. And this is where you can be useful. Like, he was essentially saying, like, Liz, look around you and make yourself useful. And again, it wasn't the job I wanted, but it was the job that needed to be done. And so I did it. And I learned the technology and learned to think like a programmer, which turned out to be later very helpful as a researcher. And I just threw myself into that. And the things that like I ended up developing a set of strengths there, teaching, communicating, simplifying, that helped me do what I wanted to do. And so like when you, and it was foundational in my career and my whole work experience was like, don't be about yourself. Like figure out what the group needs and like go be of service and make yourself useful. And I share that because like you could say, well, maybe like what a great leader would have done was like, Liz, I can see what you're interested in and what you're good at. And let's find a role where you can do that thing that you want to do. And he's like, whack, whack, whack. No, this is what we need you to do. And so I think a good leader is, yes, recognizing people's strengths, but they're also helping people point themselves towards the most important and impactful work that they can do. And sometimes that's outside of people's strengths. And we have to find ways to use our strengths in new, ways.
Great. So we've talked a lot about multipliers. How does a leader know if they're a multiplier or diminisher? Or is it an absolute one or the other?
But it's probably rarely an absolute one or the other. I mean, I know people who are total multipliers, it's all in them, top to bottom, side to side. And I know people who are some really hardened diminishers. Most of us are somewhere in between, but more like rather than like a place on a spectrum, it's like certain contexts tend to bring out a multiplier in us. Some tend to bring out an inner diminisher. And most of us are what I call an accidental diminisher, which is like you kind of got the heart and soul of a multiplier. Your intentions are really good, but you're still having a diminishing effect, often because you're being too helpful. Like you think about that great player, back to Encyclopedia Brown. Like that probably wasn't intentional, that, gee, I'm going to be such a superstar and I'm going to shut down other people. It's doing what we've been taught to do, told to do, celebrated for doing ourselves, but maybe playing so big that other people end up playing small around us.
So how do you recognize and stop being an accidental diminisher?
Well, it starts from understanding the difference between your intention and the impact of your behavior. See, a lot of times we're like, but I was meaning to do good there. I was trying to be helpful. Here's another way is I can just rattle off some of the ways that we see people accidentally diminish. And sometimes just hearing the name, people go, oh, I do that. That's me. We also have some quizzes and deeper assessments if people are interested. But here are the ways that we find it happens a lot. Let me see if I can get all 9. The idea fountain, the always on leader, the rescuer, the pace setter, the rapid responder, the optimist, the protector, the strategist, the perfectionist. Like these are ways that we see this. And like, well, let's just take one of those, the rescuer. The positive intent is when I see people struggling, I want to help. Like, I don't want to see my colleague Bruce struggling. Like, I'm going to jump in because I care about him and I'm going to offer a hand to help him get this across the finish line. And I think what I'm saying is like, Bruce, I got you. I want you to be successful. But what's messaged in my behavior is the contrary. It's, well, I don't think you can do this. I don't think you can do it alone. I don't think you can do it without me. Which is like the very essence of diminishing logic. And so we could take any one of those 9 and just look at like, what's the positive intention, but actually look at how that ends up sending very diminishing signals and in many ways like arresting other people's development.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So that makes it a difficult change for leaders to make because it's all of those things you describe. People have positive intentionality about it, right? Leaders are doing it for positive. So it's, as a leader, to be a multiplier, it's not just good enough to have positive intentionality, right? Which I think a lot of leaders sort of fall back on. Well, if I'm meaning to do well, then I'm a good leader. But what you're saying is that some of your natural tendencies, even if they're meant to do well, are not good multiplier behaviors.
No, I'll give you one that I was just thinking about last week. I was traveling somewhere with my daughter. She is now like a full-fledged adult with a job and, her education complete. And this is Amanda. She was always a really, really good student. And she was the kid that we never had to ask to do her homework. If she had done her homework, we had to tell her to stop doing homework because she was like really intent on doing well in school. And so we're always like, oh, she's overdoing it, like go out, here's a ball, go have some fun. And I remember she would come to me, this would be like her middle school years and into her high school years. So she would come to me like, oh, Mom, I've got this test tomorrow. And, oh, I feel like I'm going to fail it. And, and she would be so stressed. And so I did what looked like good parenting to me. I would say, oh, Amanda, I think you're going to ace this test because every grade she had ever had thus far was an A. Like she only knew how to get A's. And I would always say, no, I think you're going to do well. Like, don't worry about it. And I would watch what it would do to her. And she would just like walk away from our conversations grumbling. And I could see I was sort of infuriating her. And I'm like, you know what? I remember thinking, I'm going to try like a George Costanza. Do you remember the episode in Seinfeld where George does the opposite of what his instincts tell him to do?
Yes. And he succeeds dramatically well. Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to try a little George Costanza on this. And I say to her what totally goes against my nature. When she's like, oh, Mom, I've got a Spanish thing tomorrow. I'm not ready. I'm going to fail it. And I would say, wow, sounds like you're really unprepared for this. Wow, it sounds like you're going to fail this. And I was like, as the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, that's such a bad parent thing to do. I should be encouraging and positive and optimistic and all. And her reaction was so different. She just was like, oh, I know. I feel unprepared. Thanks, Mom. I got to get back to working on this. And what I realized is that my optimism about how good the outcome was going to be was actually frustrating her. And what I really needed to do was just talk about what was hard and acknowledge that it was hard. And it's one of the ways that I've changed a lot as a result of having done this research is just instead of being positive and cheerful when times are tough, looking at the upside, I look at the downside. Wow, this one's really tough. We're probably going to make some mistakes. You might not get an A on this. This might be an L, not a W. And it's amazing. It doesn't bring people down. It's it signals that you understand that it's hard and that there's a struggle and that you're creating room for failure. And so sometimes it's going against our nature to want to be helpful, to want to be positive, to want to be agile and quick. And in many ways, Bruce, I think it's so much easier to be a multiplier because what ends up causing a lot of diminishing is that managers are just trying too hard, working too hard, doing too much themselves. And sometimes for other people to do more, the leader has to do a little bit less.
Cool. So I want to make sure that we also cover a really interesting part of one of your newer books, which is Rookie Smarts. So in Rookie Smarts, you argue that learning beats knowing in today's world of work. How does that concept apply to leaders who want to stay relevant and human-centric in the age of AI and constant change? What's Rookie Smarts all about?
Well, it started from this observation that we are often at our best when we know the very least, when we're new and when we're naive and, when we're at the bottom of a learning curve. And, someone could say, oh, well, yeah, beginner's mind. And it's not that we bring great ideas when we're new. It's not really that. The value comes from this need to learn and to contribute, that when we're new to something important and hard and we know we're new and we know we're inadequate, it prompts so many of the kinds of behaviors that are prized right now in a fast changing world. It prompts us to if we've got no points on the scoreboard, we've got to find a quick win. when we don't know what we're doing, instead of bringing our own expertise, we've got to seek out expertise. We've got to like Google it, YouTube it, talk to some experts, and we end up acquiring expertise faster than just relying on old expertise. We're not encumbered by patterns. We can see things more clearly. We are more hungry for feedback. We reach out and build relationships. So many of like the agile learning kinds of behaviors are what we naturally do when we're at the bottom of a steep learning curve.
So how can someone, there are all types of people who are reading your books and learning from you, right? Some are newbies, new in their fields, or new leaders. Others are established leaders. How does a established leader who, has built success on a history of knowledge maintain rookie smarts? How do they bring it in and keep that part of who they are fresh?
Yeah. Well, I think for established leaders, there's the hard way and the easy way to get that rookie smarts. The hard way is to be really, really intentional about like cleansing our minds, staying hungry and staying humble, to borrow Steve Jobs' term from his commencement address. I think that's hard to sort of force ourselves into those mindsets. It can be done. The easier way is just to keep putting ourselves into situations that are new, that we're unfamiliar with. And I like to call this the naive yes. It's just saying yes to things we don't know how to do. And, maybe for people who are more mature in their career, instead of like saying, well, I don't know how to do that. Like I don't know how to edit videos, or I don't know how to do these kinds of things. Let me get a young person to do that for me. It's like just saying, yes, I can do it, and figuring it out. And there's a certain joy that comes. Well, there's a certain frustration that comes in doing it, but there's a joy that comes in doing it. And there's a joy that comes in kind of staying light of foot and very youthful in our approach to our work. And I think there's also like an advantage, a job market advantage to it.
Cool. So is there any way you think about like merging the ideas of multipliers and rookie smarts? Is being rookie smart characteristic of a multiplier you might bring in over time? Or how do we think about those two concepts together?
I think, they're both about how do we create a learning environment. There's a common thread through my work, and it's not like I meant it this way. It's just, I think what I tend to point myself toward is like, how do we create work environments where people can be at their best? We can utilize all the talent in the room and all the potential of the talent in the room, including rookie talent. I think part of the message to senior leaders or mature leaders is like, don't overlook the rookies in your organization. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, they're like blank slates that need to be written on. They're empty vessels that we have to fill up with our culture, and we have to train them before they can be effective. Like, people are often at their best when they're new to the organization, new to the workforce, and like find ways to utilize that. So it's like, and how do we create environments where people, like of all stations in the organization, are just constantly learning and constantly like challenged? Because that's where you're going to get people's best work.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to close out with 3 questions that I ask all of my guests to get your thoughts on. The first one is, if you could pick one leadership skill that will be even more critical in the future, what would it be?
Situational awareness. We have for the last decade plus been a little bit obsessed with self-awareness. And self-awareness is pretty important for lots of reasons, particularly because we can become accidental diminishers without a lot of it. But, in a really rapidly changing environment, being able to see what's happening around us and to acknowledge it, and building collective understanding of like what's happening and where we are in this moment, I think is a pretty critical skill. It came out of my research for the book Impact Players, is the people who have the greatest impact are people who aren't just self-aware and self-focused. Their eyes are outward and upward, paying attention to what's happening around them. So like building, perspective taking and situational awareness is pretty important right now.
Awesome. For the second question, I give all of my guests a magic wand. And since this is a Humanity at Scale podcast, I ask if you could use that magic wand and change one thing that would make organizations more humanity-centric, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to use my magic wand, not on something big and grand. I'm going to use it on something very, very small, very micro. I kind of get rid of job descriptions. I think job descriptions keep people limited and stuck. And I know we need some semblance of that to organize, but I would really say like, oh, here, let me see. This is a straw. This is my magic wand. Like I would say your job description is a suggestion. It's a starting point, not an ending point. Like find where you can be useful and go and do that. And I think it would really change people's orientation to their work.
I love that. Last question for leaders who are, and I think many of them will be inspired by your work. What's one small action they can take tomorrow to begin amplifying the people around them?
I think the most profound shift that a leader can make is shifting out of the mode of telling and operating in the mode of asking and asking good questions. If there's sort of like a practice to get really good at as a leader, it's, learning to ask good questions, interesting questions, thought-provoking questions, questions that get people innovating, thinking, disrupting, but also questions that get people taking ownership and holding themselves accountable. And if people want to kind of make rapid progress, in a short period of time, try what I call the extreme question challenge and go into a meeting or a conversation where it might be a dialogue, you might be prone to do a lot of the talking, and just say, for this duration of this 1 hour meeting, or longer, my job is only to ask questions, and don't allow yourself to make any statements. Just try this a few times and you might see something really shifts in how you see your role as a leader.
Awesome. Well, Liz, this is unbelievable. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for your work. Yeah, making our workplaces more humane and places where people can really grow and do great work. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I hope you found my conversation with Liz as insightful and as energizing as I did. Her work reminds us that the best leaders aren't those with all the answers, but those who create space for others to think, contribute, and grow. That's how we build organizations that are not only more successful, but more human at scale. If you enjoyed this discussion, please share it with your colleagues and friends who are thinking about leadership, talent development, or building purpose-driven organizations. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations on what it truly means to lead with impact, legacy, and humanity. Now let's move into the after show, a space where I'll reflect on key takeaways from my conversation with Liz. What a fantastic conversation with Liz. Her work really challenges the traditional view of leadership. Many leaders believe their job is to be the expert, have all the answers, and drive results. But Liz flips that thinking. The best leaders aren't those at the center of everything, but those who create the conditions for others to shine. That's the essence of her Multipliers framework. Multipliers unlock the intelligence of those around them. Diminishers, on the other hand, often unintentionally hold their teams back. And that's where something really struck me. Most diminishing leaders aren't doing it on purpose. Liz introduced the idea of accidental diminishers, leaders with good intentions who unknowingly limit their teams. This really resonated because I've seen so many leaders fall into these traps. For example, the rescuer wants to help but jumps in too soon, preventing people from learning. The rapid responder moves so quickly that others don't have time to contribute. And the optimist tries to encourage but may overlook real challenges. It's easy to think, well, I meant well, so I must be leading well. But intention doesn't equal impact. True leadership is about creating space for others to step up. Another insight that stood out with Liz's distinction between tense and intense environments. Tense environments create stress, making people shut down. Intense environments challenge people, bring out their best. This reminded me of elite sports teams. The best coaches don't just demand effort, they push athletes in a way that motivates and empowers them. The same applies to business. Leaders need to set high expectations, but also give people autonomy, ownership, and trust. This is a critical balance in today's workplace. Many organizations expect employees to do more with less. Leaders need to push their teams without burning them out. Another powerful takeaway was Liz's rookie smarts concept. Learning is more valuable than knowing. In today's rapidly changing world, relying too much on past expertise can actually be a liability. So how do experienced leaders stay fresh and adaptable? Say yes to things you don't know how to do. Stay curious. Instead of defaulting to expertise, keep learning. And embrace discomfort. Growth happens at the edge of our capabilities. This shift in mindset doesn't just help leaders. It builds a culture where curiosity and adaptability fuel innovation. If you're looking for one practical step to take tomorrow, try the Extreme Question Challenge. In your next meeting, commit to only asking questions instead of making statements. This does a few powerful things. It forces you to listen more. It encourages others to step up and think critically. And it shifts your leadership style from directing to empowering. Give it a try and see how it changes the conversation. At the core of Liz's work is a message that deeply aligns with humanity at scale. Great leadership isn't about exerting control. It's about creating environments where people can do their best work. Multipliers don't just drive results. They bring out the best in people. And that's what we need to do more of in today's workplaces. Leaders who elevate others, build trust, and create cultures that are both high-performing and deeply human. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague or friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more conversations about what it truly means to lead with impact, legacy, and humanity. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting, positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.